Engineering at Global Academy of Technology, Bengaluru. He is also known for his research in the area of physiological signal processing. He has published more than 70 research articles in the peer-reviewed international journals having high impact factors. He served as a guest editor in many special issues of reputed journals, international journals, and also he received 3,900 citations to his published papers so far and has H index of 31. He is serving as scientific reviewer in 15 elsewhere journals in the area of biomedical signal processing. He is a senior member of IEEE USA and lifetime member of ISTE. He also listed in one among the top 2% of researchers in the world in the recent survey conducted by the researchers at Stanford University, which is published in the scientific journal PLOS Biology. Now I request Sir to present and share his knowledge to all the participants for this FTP. Thank you, sir.
Hello. Thank you, madam, for giving such a nice introduction of mine. Good morning to all. We'll start our session. My session title is Clustering Techniques for Data Analysis. Okay. Yeah. This is my topic, clustering techniques for data analysis. You've been. Hello, are you able to see the screen? Participants, please, one of you please confirm.
Yes, sir. Screen is visible, sir.
Fine. So my topic is clustering techniques for data analysis. You are going through this workshop on data analysis, mathematical foundations of data sciences and its applications. So I'm giving some details about clustering techniques which are used in machine learning. I am Dr. Roshan Joy Martis, Associate Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering in Global Academy of Technology. Okay, these are my contents. I will be explaining what is classification. Then one category of classification we call as clustering. Then some quantitative measurements I will discuss. There could be measurement of dissimilarity, that could be measurement of similarity. Then one clustering algorithm called k-means clustering. Then we'll go to Gaussian mixture model, where we study some base probabilities, develop some background for required for Gaussian mixture model, and then we'll discuss on the algorithm for both k-means as well as Gaussian mixture model. Okay, so what is classification? I think you have gone through in the previous sessions of this workshop. Classification is nothing but identifying patterns in the nature. Okay, so you may come across many instances where you need to categorize items. For example, maybe in the fish, when it is coming the conveyor belt, you want to categorize it as salmon or sea bass. This is one simple example of classification. Maybe you want to classify some unknown or suspicious activity. In the railway station, you may find surveillance cameras, and any criminal or terrorist, if he is walking, that has to be detected. That is also an example of example of classification. Classification of students in a class based on their height into lower height students and higher height students. That is another example of classification. Maybe I just explained about surveillance example, where you want to classify the head, the face and non-face region in that image. So there are also face region, we call it as foreground region, and other things other than face, whatever there in that image, we call it as background. Okay, and we need an algorithm to separate what is foreground and what is background. So there also we require pattern classifiers. Okay, and in biomedical applications, you know, the tissue biopsy they take. Okay, from the tissue biopsy, it is cultured and they will apply some chemical to that, so that certain things are highlighted in that, and then that slide is kept below the electron microscope, and then the pathologist, he will see the slide through the microscope, and he will find the cell boundary, and then if the cells are in a proper orderly manner, then he call it as normal, and if the cells are abnormally different size and their alignment changes, then it is an indication of cancer or sarcoma. Okay, so these are various applications where classification can be carried out. Every application we read classification. Every decisions we make in our life, they require proper categorization. That is called pattern classification. So the idea of machine learning or data science deals with handling this data and give the intelligent inference based on the data. It may be your surveillance camera in the railway stations where the image is there. It has to be identified as, is it a criminal or a normal person? So these are some of the examples of classification. So going further, there are two types of classification. We call them as supervised learning and unsupervised learning. In supervised learning, I think you have covered it in your previous sessions. Supervised learning means there is a teacher who teaches the classifier. Actually, how we make decision intelligently, we are making decisions that has to be mimicked on a computer or on some intelligent hardware. Okay, so we have to impart the knowledge. How we decide that process has to be imparted on a machine, and this is called machine learning actually. So there are two types of learning. One is supervised learning, where there is a someone who says what has to be classified to where. It is something like you have apple and oranges, and you want to categorize which are apples, which are oranges. So what you will do in our life, in the childhood, we see oranges and apples, and we are taught by our parents, and then now we are able to make a decision on whether it is apple or orange. Same thing, we have to train the machine, and then the machine will be able to identify the pattern, identify the fruit. Okay, that is called learning or classification. Okay, supervised learning means there is a teacher who says this is apple and this is orange. Okay, so generally when you come across various data, the data has number of parameters. Suppose this apple and orange, you cannot take the entire image of apple and feed to the classifier. If you take the entire image of the apple, there may be a lot of thousands of pixels. So it is difficult to mine the information from that image. So in order to overcome that, we take some quantitative measurements from each fruit or from each object, and those measures are used for classification, assuming that those measures are representative of that object or the fruit, and they will be able to they will give a good discrimination with which we are able to classify them. This is supervised learning. Whereas unsupervised learning means you will have a number of objects and you have number of data, and you've taken some quantitative measurements from each of the data, and then you are using it quantitative measurements for classification. Okay. Same way in unsupervised learning, these quantitative measurements are there. They are plotted in the graph, plotted in the space. Like if you have only one parameter, you can plot it in the in one-dimensional space. Like in one axis you will have, in that you can mark it. Suppose only height is there. So height is a number which you can plot on a straight line somewhere. Okay, so suppose you can have more than one measurements from an object, then you will get into multi-dimensional space. You may come across two-dimensional space, 3, or even it can go to higher dimensions also, which we visually cannot see, but we have to impart the machine to categorize and find the discrimination in this data. Okay, so yeah, this is the supervised learning. Some points in supervised learning: teacher is present who teaches the machine. Data is divided into two parts in supervised learning, that is called training data and testing data. Okay, training data is used to teach the machine that which pattern or which object belongs to which class. This information is given. Okay, so in the training data we have the quantitative measurements from each object, as well as we will have information that which object belongs to which category. This information is supplied in training data. So training data consists of quantitative measurements about the object, as well as the object label also is present in the training data. So with the object label and the quantitative parameters present in the object, we have to find a mapping between this data to the outcome, that is the class label. This correspondence one has to compute during the training process of a classifier, and based on this correspondence, a test example is taken, and based on the already learned information or the learned correspondence, the machine has to say this belongs to apple, this belongs to orange. Okay, so in the training set, the group label is provided, or the class label, or we call it as group label, or we also call it as category label. Okay. There are two phases in supervised learning. One is training, another is testing. I hope you have studied this in this previous sessions. There are two phases in supervised learning: training and testing. Training means teaching the machine. Testing means based on the trained knowledge, how accurately it categorizes. That is called testing. During training, the mapping between input data and class label is understood or learned. During testing, each example in the test data is categorized based on already learned information, or based on the already learned knowledge. Okay. Then performance of classification is assessed based on how correctly or how accurately the testing data is classified. Okay. Any doubts? Okay. Next we'll go to unsupervised learning, where a teacher is one second. Yeah, where a teacher is not required. Okay, in unsupervised learning, teacher is not required, and therefore, since the information that which object belongs to which class is not provided, we don't have class label in unsupervised learning. Okay, but seeing the data, seeing the distribution of the quantitative measurements drawn from the data, the natural groupings in the objects is to be determined. So how we say which object belongs to which category? Okay, we need to have some measurement of distance or measurement of similarity, or we should have some measurement of dissimilarity. We should be able to say this object is matching to one category, and another object we should be able to associate with a class. Okay, for that we have to take a measurement. For example, Bangalore and Bombay. So you take a place in Bangalore and ask whether it is near to Bangalore or Bombay. So you will say, if the place is somewhere from the Bangalore, you will say it belongs to Bangalore. So how you can do it? Okay, so Bangalore city you take, and that place which you want to classify you take, and measure the geographical distance. And if the geographical distance is large, then you cannot associate with Bangalore. If the geographical distance is less, then you can easily associate with Bangalore, like that. If the distance is distance between the place to Bangalore is smaller than the distance from this place to the Bombay, then you can Mumbai, you can call it as the place belongs to near to Bangalore, like that. So yeah, similar objects are grouped into the same class, and not similar or dissimilar objects are categorized into different classes. This is the philosophy is used, and similarity measurement is used to determine whether how similar it is. Quantitatively and objectively it can be assessed. The distance between two objects or the similarity between the two objects, this can be quantitatively found out with various measurements. I'll come to that in the subsequent. Okay, the data is partitioned into subsets, each of which is called a cluster. Okay, so clustering is also a unsupervised learning, and in the clustering, data is a data space you have. You can measure quantitative measurements from each data, and these measurements can be represented in a two-dimensional or a higher dimensional space, depending on how many parameters you have chosen measured. So then that space itself is partitioned, Partition means some regions are defined in that space. Each region is called as a cluster. Okay, so data is subdivided, data space is subdivided into subspaces, and each subspace is called as a cluster. Okay. Okay, then the performance of clustering is measured based on how correctly the inherent groupings in the data is explored. This means you have data measurements and you're plotting in a some dimensional space, and if the distance between one class to that point is nearer, then it will be associated to that class, and this ability we call it as inherent groupings in the data, and this has to be explored. Okay, so some misclassification may take place. It depends on the nature of the data, and based on that one can measure the performance of clustering, whether all points in the data are correctly grouped, or any one point or any one object is missed. Then what is the performance? Okay, so out of all the objects, how many are correctly classified? Out of 100, how many classified? And that we call it as performance of clustering. So much percentage of accuracy we say, or performance. That depends on total number of objects and how many objects are correctly classified or correctly associated to the class. It is called performance measurement. Okay, so here to associate an object to a class, we require either dissimilarity measure or similarity measure, which can define how near the objects are, different objects. Okay, each object means a point framed in the space. Okay, each object is nothing but a point present in the space, and when you have a number of measurements from every object, okay, say you have two measurements from one object, so you can take two measurements for all objects and you can plot it in the space. So every point will be one object in that space. So you have to find out the similarity or dissimilarity between different objects. So we require distance measurement. Okay, so dissimilarity measurement we can use, or we can use similarity measurement. Okay, we will discuss about dissimilarity measurement first, and then we'll go to similarity measurement. Say Bombay and Mumbai and Bangalore, they are far. A place near to Bangalore, we will associate with Bangalore only. So the distance, geographical distance from that point to that city, if it is nearer, then distance is less, no? Okay, so the objects, if you consider Bangalore and that place which you want to associate to, Bangalore or Mumbai, if that is distance is large, then it is far. So this distance gives me dissimilarity. Dissimilarity means not similar, they are different, far. The value of that measurement, if it is large, then we say that measurement, the two objects are far. Okay, as the dissimilarity measurement is large, the objects are far. Okay, and if the objects are nearby, then dissimilarity is less. Example is some distance measure functions, which are Euclidean distance, which could be Manhattan distance, which can be city block distance. Manhattan distance is also called city block distance. Or in general, it can be a Minkowski distance. Minkowski distance is more general to Euclidean or Manhattan or absolute distance. It is a more general. Minkowski measurement is more general compared to these measurements. Of course, for a particular condition, Minkowski measurement can be Euclidean distance. Okay, so among objects, if the dissimilarity measurement is more, then they are likely to belong different clusters. Okay, any doubts? Okay, so some of the dissimilarity measurements I am discussing here. So simplest one is Euclidean distance, or absolute distance also we can have, but here we have given Euclidean distance. Euclidean distance between two objects or 2 points in the data space is nothing but the difference between the two and square it, then take the sum and then square root. This is called Euclidean distance. Okay, the difference is squared and you sum it for all variable, all variables. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. If you have two measurements about an object, then you will have this two-dimensional space. And suppose if you have three measurement about every object, then you will have three axes. Or you can have d-dimensional space also. Okay, so then distance we are computing just as this point minus this point, then square it and sum it for all points and take the square root. Sum it for all parameters or all axes or all the basis functions. It is also called as basis function. Okay, and this distance is translation invariant. Okay, that means if these 2 points occur here and if the same far there, what we get is same as if these 2 points are with the same distance in some other place. So that is called Euclidean distance is translation invariant. Same way we have Manhattan distance or city block distance it is called, which is nothing but in Euclidean we have taken square, but here we are taking absolute operation. Okay, and in the Euclidean distance we have a square root. Here we don't have. The reason is the difference is already squared and summed, and then we are taking a square root. Then it is on the same linear scale. Whereas here just the difference we are taking and summing, and we are not squaring. So therefore both are the both in the same range we'll get the distance. That's why we have squaring and square root, and we don't have any squaring or square rooting here. Okay, so Minkowski measurement is little general to the Euclidean distance. Okay, and it is defined as dp of xi comma xj is equal to sum for all features or all quantitative measurements, then of absolute difference the power p, and then total sum is taken pth root. Okay, so this is called Minkowski measurement. When p is equal to 1, what is my Minkowski distance?
Manhattan city block.
Yeah, that's what. When p is equal to 1, it will become city block distance, and when p becomes 2, it is called Euclidean distance.
Euclid.
And when it becomes higher, we have various Minkowski distances for different p. Okay, city block distance can be computed, just the vertical and horizontal distance summing. Okay. Okay, now we have discussed dissimilarity measurement. We saw that dissimilarity measurement is large if the objects are far. Now, I have an opposite measurement which we call it a similarity measurement, which is a different from or opposite of dissimilarity measurement. Here, if the objects are close, then my similarity is more. And when the objects are far, my similarity is less. Okay. Whereas in dissimilarity, when the objects are near, dissimilarity is less. When the objects are far, my dissimilarity was large. Here it is exactly opposite. When the objects are nearby, similarity measurement is large. And when objects are far, the similarity measurement is less. And example distances are Mahalanobis distance, then likelihood estimate are the examples of similarity measurement. Okay. Among objects, if the similarity measure is more, they are likely to belong same clusters, and otherwise they will belong to other different classes. Okay, so I will go to a quantitative measurement of similarity measurement now. Okay, now this is Mahalanobis distance. It is defined as probability of, this is also called as likelihood, the probability of a given pattern. Xn is a given pattern or a given object. Of course, it has d-dimensional measurements. D quantitative measurement, it has xn. Nth object which has d measurements. Okay, so it is the d features we can say, or d number of parameters we are deriving from the data. D number of quantitative measurements we have, and nth object we are categorizing into kth class. Lambda k means lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda k. We have k number of classes in the data, and nth object we are taking, and each object has d number of measurements, and this is called Mahalanobis distance. Okay, so 1 by 2 pi dimension by 2, then sigma k is called covariance matrix, and that matrix we have to take its determinant and we have to take the power of half. Then we have exponential measurement, minus half into the object minus the center of a class. Okay, then it's a transpose. Then we have the covariance matrix, its inverse. Then we have xn minus mu k multiplied. So this whatever we have inside this is called a dissimilarity measurement. Okay, so when this value is large, we will get smaller probability, whereas if this value is small, we will get less probability. Okay, so this is similarity measurement. It is different than your Euclidean distance. Probability is large when the objects are near, and probability is small when objects are far. And UK is the class center or class mean vector, it is called, which is defined as the average of all the patterns or objects present in that class divided by how many such number of objects are there. This is the mean. Okay, mean cluster mean class mean vectors it is called. Okay, so it is given by sum of all the patterns present in that present in that class divided by how many such objects were there in that particular class. This is the mean, and sigma k is nothing but the covariance matrix. Okay, so you know, if you have one variable, you can compute mean, and mean you can compute. When you have two objects, what you can do? You can take mean, you can take the covariance also. Along with variance, you can take covariance also. So if you have two objects, so then you have two-dimensional covariance matrix. Okay, so you will have 4 elements within that covariance matrix. So first element is nothing but sigma 1 1, the standard deviation of the first class. Okay, the covariance matrix, within matrix you have sigma 1 square, then sigma 1 2, then sigma 2 1, then sigma 2 square. Okay, this is called covariance matrix. We can represent as a matrix all these things. Variance
Sir, one question. The first formula, P of xn by y lambda, this is actually standard normal distribution curve.
Yes, it is standard normal distribution only, but for multivariate data.
Yeah, what is the difference, this formula, and is there any relation or no relation?
There is relation. This is Mahalanobis distance, and it is a Gaussian distribution.
Okay.
Mahalanobis distance for Gaussian distributed data is defined like with this formula. And if the distribution becomes other distributions like multinomial or in a binomial, then the formula changes.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
It is distribution dependent. If the distribution of the data is Gaussian, we can apply this formula.
Okay, sir. Okay.
And most of the data which we find in the nature is Gaussian distributed.
Sir,
yes.
One more point, sir. Normal, standard normal distribution is lies between 3 to -3, whatever that. So actually, in the table, normal distribution table. So is there exhaust this formula, or that's also picked?
No, I didn't get it. Can you repeat?
Standard normal distribution table, you know that. So that values, standard values, 0 to 3 in the table.
Okay.
That formula actually in the particular in mathematics, but this formula is other than that value, or is only 0 to 3?
No. You mean quartiles in standard normal distribution?
Okay.
No, I didn't get it. Do you mean quartiles?
Yeah, he meant quantiles, but this one covers a wide range of data.
Yeah, most of the data is present between mean minus standard deviation plus mean till mean plus standard deviation. That range you are speaking?
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
No, I didn't. Okay, fine. Okay, so this is the Mahalanobis distance, which is a probabilistic measurement, and if the mu and x they are nearby, then we will get a larger value for the probability, and if mu and x they are far, then we will get a smaller value for the probability. And mu is given by the mean, and sigma k is the covariance matrix. Covariance matrix is calculated using every pattern minus corresponding mean for that class, and same thing multiplied and taken transpose, and you sum for all the objects present in this class. Then we will get the covariance matrix. Okay. So this is some preliminary. So some introduction about classification, then clustering, then similarity and dissimilarity measurement. So now with this background, we can enter into clustering algorithms. So clustering algorithms are broadly classified into two. They are hierarchical and Bayesian and partition. So clustering algorithms are broadly classified into hierarchical, Bayesian and partitional. Three categories are there in clustering algorithms. So hierarchical algorithm means they are again divided into two, divisive and agglomerative. Divisive clustering means when you have the data, you can initially we are considering entire data belongs to only one class. Then we are computing the measurements of metrics, and then we are dividing into further. Okay, so that division continues until the inherent number of clusters are correctly classified. Okay, that is divisive algorithm in hierarchical clustering. Same way in agglomerative method of hierarchical clustering, we assume that how many objects are there in that data, that many classes we assume initially. If we have 100 data points, we will say 100 classes are there in the data. Then we compare the distance, and then we start merging objects into different classes. And then we are merging, and finally we will get the required number of clusters. So they are opposite, divisive and agglomerative, they are opposite kind of classification strategies. Then partitional clustering means just partitioning. We have the data space that is partition based on similarity or dissimilarity measurement. In k-means, we are using Euclidean distance. And same way in model-based classification, we are using probability measurements. If the model is Gaussian, we can use Mahalanobis distance, and if any other distribution, we can respectively choose that model. And graph theoretic methods are also there. There also we are getting some information measurement, and based on that entropy and all we can compute, and based on that we can cluster the data. Then spectral partitioning methods are also there, same way. And Bayesian clustering method is another category where decision based or non-parametric approaches we can use. So this is broadly clustering algorithms. Okay, these are broadly clustering algorithms. Okay, yeah. Now we'll come to the k-means clustering algorithm. Okay, the k-means it is the k number of classes in the data. Means means we are using mean measurement to clustering. The criteria we are using is mean measurement, distance and all, we are taking the average. So therefore we call it as k-means clustering, because it doesn't use the class label. It was proposed in 1967 and by McQueen, and after that there are many variants. One of them is called Linde-Buzot-Gray algorithm, and now there are many k-means clustering algorithm variants. In 2012 or 13, there was a paper by Anil K. Jain on data clustering methods beyond since 50 years. He has proposed a good survey about all k-means clustering variants in his paper. It is published in some 2011 or 12, I feel. Okay. Now the simplest k-means algorithm, the steps are as follows. The number of clusters k has to be chosen well before the clustering. Okay, so k is fixed at the beginning of clustering. So choose k data points as initial centroids. Okay, we assume there are k number of classes in the data. K can be 2 or k can be 3, depending on the inherent number of classes. Then any randomly few points we take, and few means k points we'll take from the data, and we'll assign them as different centroids for different clusters. Centroid means center point in every cluster. Okay. Once that is done, each data point is assigned to the closest centroid based on distance measurement. dissimilarity measurement is used. Okay, then third step is based on already assigned points in a given class, the centroids are again computed, because as with the new assignment, some points get associated with the other class. So with the number of points present in every class, we are again computing the centroid. Okay, then this process is continued. Then go back to second step, based on the new centroid, again assign different points to the different classes, then again compute the centroid and repeat it a number of times. And you stop it when there are specific conditions are met, which I will describe in the next slide. Okay, so the steps in k-means clustering are: initially choose number of clusters and that many points you choose, and assign them as initial centroids. Then based on the initially defined centroid, assign every data point to the closest centroid. Then once again compute the centroid based on the cluster belongingness. Then repeat that second and third process until you get a convergence. Okay, convergence means when you run a number of times, if you continue the iterations, the points belong to the same classes. There is no change in the clustering. That time you have to stop the classification. That time we say that convergence is achieved. Okay, so we have to stop this iteration in different conditions. One of them is a number of steps have been over, maybe 100 or 1000 steps, 100 or 200 iterations are over, you are stopping. Another criteria is if you go to the next iteration, again you get the same clusters and there is no change in the new clustering in the next iteration. So that time we can stop. So there are different conditions to stop the iterations, and that conditions are called as convergence criteria. Okay, yeah, this is a graphically I'm showing here. There are two measurements are taken from every object. Object can be anything, maybe face recognition, any application. So two measurements you compute from every object, and each measurement, each object can be represented as a point in the coordinate space. Okay, so here first point I'm taking, plus it is given here, I'm just circling. So its projection on the x-axis is my first measurement, and its projection on the second axis is my second measurement. This way I can represent every data in this two-dimensional space, since I have two measurements. If my measurements become 3, then it will go to the higher dimension. So before k-means, we have some different points like this. And if you see clearly, you can see these points, they are near, and these points are also near, these are also near, but between these groups, they are far. Okay, so you can draw a boundary like this, and you can say they belong to different classes. Okay, so this can be automated using a k-means clustering algorithm. Okay, we have to specify that there are 3 classes in the data. We can see here and we can say, and then based on the distance measurement, it will reorganize into different clusters. After a large number of iterations, we will get this kind of clustering. Okay, any doubts? This is qualitative idea about k-means clustering. Okay, this is just a qualitative idea about k-means clustering. Okay, now we'll go to the actual algorithm. Okay, so k-means clustering, we define a cost function, or we also call it as an objective function that needs to be minimized, because we are considering the distance measurement. We are considering distance measurement, and there is a dissimilarity measurement, and dissimilarity is large when the patterns belong to different classes. So that we have to minimize. The objects belonging to a class should be as near as possible. Okay, so when they are near, distance will be less. So you need to minimize the this distance function, or we call it as objective function or cost function, which needs to be minimized. And the cost function is nothing but the difference between every object to the corresponding centroid of that class. It's a norm, squared norm, and then add it for all objects in that class, and then do it for all classes and sum them. This will become my cost function. and I have to minimize this cost function and find out the new mean, so that for which my objective function is the most minimum. Okay, so this is a k-means clustering algorithm. So various steps include first initialization, then data assignment, centroid estimation, test for convergence, and if the test is convergent is true, if the convergence is there, then we have to stop. Otherwise, go back to step 2a and iterate this process continuously. This is k-means clustering. The objective function is given by the difference of distance between a given point to the class centroid for which it belongs. It's squared norm, add for all patterns or all objects in a class, and repeat it for all classes. This is my objective function. This needs to be minimum. In the initialization, cluster centroid vectors, you're assuming there are k number of classes in the data. So k centroid vectors you're choosing, randomly choosing some data as centroid points. Okay. Then based on the already chosen centroid points, we are computing the distance from different objects or data points, and for which or for which centroid, which class it is minimum, we have to assign to that class. Argument max minimum means you have this xn minus mu I mod square, right? So this for which I it is minimum, that I have to assign it to yn. This is what it means, argument minimum. Whatever we have inside, we have to compute it for all I, and for which I it is minimum, that I is my yn. This is data assignment. Okay. Now, based on this assigned data, I have to compute the centroid. Okay. That is done by finding all the points which are there in a cluster, averaging them, we are getting a new centroid. Okay. Suppose we have 3 classes. We are computing this yn. Then once we have different points belong to the classes, we are once again computing the average among all points within that class. Okay. So this is centroid computation. Then we are testing for convergence. Okay. If it is converged, we stop it. If it is not converged, we go back to step 2a, then 2b, then test for convergence. If it is converged, stop. Otherwise, repeat it continuously until convergence criteria is met. Okay. This is k-means clustering algorithm in a formal way. Okay. Any doubts? Okay. So when k-means algorithm converges, so iterations are stopped when convergence is achieved. So the 3 conditions I have given here. So no reassignments of data points to different clusters either, or new centroids are same as old centroids, or a number of steps have been exhausted. You can stop the algorithm. Okay. So there are 3 conditions, 3 different convergence criteria are defined. They are when new assignment of data is done to the cluster. So the new clustering is same as the old clustering. Then you have to stop the algorithm, and there is no change of centroids even if you once again compute. So then you have to stop it, and a number of steps have been exhausted. You can stop the algorithm. Okay. Okay. Now we'll go to another kind of algorithm, which we call it as mixture model. And if the data distribution is Gaussian, we call it as Gaussian mixture model, which we call it as GMM. Okay. For that, some probabilistic basics are required. So just I will cover, and then I will go to the Gaussian mixture model. Okay. So you have a number of objects in each class. So what is the proportion of objects in that class with respect to all objects in that data? And this we call it as priori probability. Suppose I have 100 apples and 100 oranges. So my priori probability is 0.5. Okay. So however, I have 150 apples and 50 oranges. Then my priori probability of apple is 150 by 200 into 100, and corresponding priori probability for oranges is 50 by 200 into 100. Okay, this way I can compute the priori probability. How many proportion of objects belong to a given class? that becomes your priori probability. Okay, then you can also compute the class conditional density, which is here P of D bar H. It is defined as probability of observing data D given some already condition, given a condition, what is my probability? This is called class conditional density. Okay, so same way we can also have posterior probability, which we have to compute in our Gaussian mixture model, and that is given by probability of H bar D. Okay, these things we'll discuss in detail. So we have three probabilities: priori probability, class conditional density, and posteriori probability. Priori probability is also called as a priori probability, and posterior probability is also called as maximum. Is called as a posteriori probability. Okay, so these are different names, but they're same. Okay, now Bayesian theorem gives you the total probability, which is nothing but your posterior probability is equal to class conditional density into priori divided by total probability. I think all of you know this. I will skip this. Okay. Okay. So from that we can derive that maximum a posteriori condition, so that we can assign our data to which category. Okay. This also I skip. I think you know it. And this maximum likelihood hypothesis is given by this, for which data or for which condition it is maximum corresponding index, that we call it as maximum likelihood hypothesis. I think you know this. This is mathematical preliminaries. I will just skip this. Okay. Now next, coming to Gaussian mixture model, where we have a data which has a number of groups or number of clusters, and so data is composed of number of classes, or we call it as mixtures. Our data is mixed with different objects from different classes. So okay, so we can plot. This will come little later. I think I will go to some basics. Okay, so Gaussian mixture model, we are using likelihood or Mahalanobis distance. We are using likelihood or Mahalanobis distance, which is given by this expression we just discussed. D is the dimensionality of the data, or the number of measurements which were derived from the data. Every object, how many measurements we have, that is called D, and Xn is a given data point, lambda k is a given class. Okay, so lambda 1 is class 1, lambda 2 is class 2, lambda 3 is class 3, like that. Cluster, sorry. Yeah. So which is equal to 1 by 2 pi power D by 2, then covariance matrix, its determinant power half, and this exponential, this measurement, which will be minus half into the data point minus the cluster center, then covariance matrix into the data point minus cluster center. Okay, so covariance matrix is used to represent multi-variate data. When you have one variable, or when you have only one measurement from every data, you can just use normal distribution expression. When you have multivariate distribution, more than 2 or more variable measurements for each data, you can use this expression. And this is multivariate Gaussian distribution only, with which how you can extract the probability. When when your distribution changes other than normal or Gaussian, you will get a different expression based on your distribution. Okay, mu and sigma are the class mean. Sorry, mu is the class mean vector and sigma is the covariance matrix. Okay, so one variable we have. If we have only one parameter feature or one measurement, we can have a simple Gaussian distribution. But when we have multiple variables, we have to use this formula. Okay. Yeah, this is for one dimension or one feature, how the Gaussian mixture model looks. Okay, suppose I have only one class in the data. I don't have multiple classes. So obviously data is centered at some point, which we can see here. Here points are very less. As we go to the right, here we find more dense points are there. And as we go away, it is reduces a density of points. So we can draw a histogram and plot this, or this is called probability density function of getting points on this axis. So here points are very far, so possibility of getting more points here is less. As you go right, you will get more points. The curve rises, and here there is a peak. And as you go forward, the density of points reduces, and finally it meets to zero asymptotically as your x-axis increases. Number of points will be less there. Okay, so this is Gaussian distribution. So corresponding probability is given by this expression for one variable. So if you have more than one variates, this formula changes. Okay. So this is the Gaussian mixture, Gaussian model, not mixture model. Okay, this information we require for the subsequent slides. Okay, so univariate Gaussian distributed data looks like this. Here only one cluster we have, so we get one peak and reduces. And Gaussian distribution, we can find the corresponding expression for computing the probability. Okay, now here we can see we have a one measurement. We don't have more than one measurement. We have only one measurement from every object, and we can see similar object. It can be, I told, height measurement from every student. We are categorizing students into smaller height and larger height. So the smaller, obviously, if you express the height in a chart, you can plot them each and you can get this kind of curve. Okay, so when height is small, we can plot it, every measurement from every student, we can plot it in this x-axis. Okay, someone's height is 150 odd, then 180, then even 220, depends on the height. So you can see around 170 to 180, you find more students have the height between 170 to 180. So here we find a peak, and to the left it reduces, to the right also it reduces. Okay, this is okay. Then for the larger height students, we can see their height is more. Okay, obviously in the same way you will get a peak. Okay, so this is a mixture model. Previous one is not a mixture model. It is a single class is there and it is one variate, univariate. Whereas here we have two classes in the data and we are plotting the distribution, Gaussian mixture. There are two classes in the data and each class is Gaussian distributed. So you are getting this kind of distribution. So this is a mixture model. Okay, mixture of densities are present here. Okay, but all the mixtures follow Gaussian distribution here. Each one doesn't follow a different distribution. Okay, so the point here which lies between both the points, you have to associate it with one of the class based on the probability measurement. Okay. If the probability is larger, likelihood probability is larger for the first class, it will belong to the smaller height students, and if the likelihood is larger, you will get it to the other class. Okay, so now we'll see the Gaussian mixture model. Okay, yeah, we have seen this expression, which is the class conditional density is given by this expression, and mu and sigma are defined in this expression like this. Okay, mu is nothing but average of all the patterns in that group. Okay, all the measurements are averaged to get my mean, and covariance is given by the difference between the given object with the mean, and we're multiplying it once again and summing and dividing by the number of patterns, number of objects present in that particular class. So this is my covariance matrix. Covariance matrix is used for a higher variate data. When there are more variates in the data, you can use covariance matrix. When you have only one variable, you can use standard deviation. Okay. Now this is the Gaussian mixture model where you can see the maximization criteria. Okay, so alpha k is called the priori probability, and p of xn bar lambda k is my class conditional density, and we are taking the product of class priori probability and class conditional density, and which we are summing for all the classes and summing for all the objects in that data, and that is my maximization function, which has to be maximized. In our k-means algorithm, we had minimization because our distance measure should be as less as possible within a given class. But here, within a given class, our probability should be as maximum as possible. So we need to maximize the objective function here. Alpha k are the priori probabilities such that sum of the priori probabilities is equal to 1. Okay. Now the algorithm is explained below. The iterative Gaussian mixture model algorithm is given by, there are few steps. It is similar to your Gaussian k-means algorithm in structure, but instead of minimization, we have maximization here. And you can find the similarity. The first step is initialization, then iterations, and then convergence. These three steps are common for both. Okay. First point is initialization. Randomly initialize some points to the class and say that they are the initial centroids, initial means, class mean vector. Then we have two steps in the second step. One is expectation step, another is maximization step. Yeah, in the expectation step, you are computing the posterior probability of model K given the data, every data point. And current model parameters are estimated using this formula. This expression can be derived from the previous, this probability measurement we had, right? From this expression, we can derive the re-estimates of our, in the E step, what is my re-estimated probabilities. This expression, we can easily derive it. I am not going to give the steps, derivation steps. This time giving the final expression and giving the interpretation. Okay. So posterior probability is obtained as the priori probability into class conditional density divided by sum of the numerator for all classes. This is called total probability in the denominator. So this is called priori into class conditional density divided by total probability. Okay. Okay. Now these are the class mean and class covariance matrix and class priori probabilities. We can re-estimate them in the maximization step. So my new mean will be my new mean will be the sum of class conditional density into the patterns and summing for all such patterns and divided by the total class conditional probability for all points. This can be easily computed. Same way we can compute the class condition, the class covariance matrix for every class, and with this expression. Okay, this expression can easily be derived. A number of steps are required. If you need, I'll just give you the paper after the class, after this session. Okay, then this priori probability is re-estimated using this formula. This expression also can be derived from the previous expressions. Of course, the derivation I'm not getting into. Okay, so stop the algorithm once these estimates will remain the same. Even in the next iteration, you will not get a new value. Okay, new value for mu k. It will be the same as previous, almost same. Then we can say that the algorithm is converged. Okay, so then once your algorithm is converged, you take the product of priori probability and class conditional density, and this product is maximum for which k, corresponding k is the class. Okay, corresponding is my cluster. Okay, so every data point you take and compute this after the algorithm is converged, priori probability into class conditional density for every point, and for which k it is maximum, corresponding k is my class label or the corresponding cluster for which my data has to belong. So first point I will take, compute this, then for which n I can assign it. Okay, so any doubts? Okay, now finally coming our mixture model, how it looks. Of course, we have mixture model means there are many components in it which follow the similar statistical model. Okay, here there are two components. You can see the green and blue. These are the two components in the data. Okay, they are mixed. We have two categories in the data. So we are computing the posterior probability, this blue colored one. Posterior probability is large for the first class and then it will reduce. Same way we can derive the posterior probability for the second class, which will be smaller for the first category and large for the second category, with which you can easily compute the posterior and you can assign it to various classes. Okay. So any discussion you can discuss. Yeah, any doubts you can address, you can just ask. Any doubts?
Sir, in cluster algorithm, which algorithm is best? So
Yeah, that is based on the data. How the actually, if you consider a data and if you ask which model works best, it has to be experimentally determined. Because which clustering model works well for a data, it depends on that particular data characteristics.
Okay.
And every clustering algorithm has some bias and variance. So for some characteristics of the data, it will work better for some characteristics of the data. And this addressing this is, it depends on the data. It should be experimentally determined. You cannot say entirely which clustering method gives a better performance for which data. So it depends on the data characteristics. You have to experimentally verify.
Okay, sir. Okay.
And that's the reason we have so many papers. Every researcher is publishing because every data characteristics are different, and the model has its own bias. So it depends.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
Sir, hello.
Hello, yes.
Hi, sir. I just wanted to, if you can highlight that how SOM is different from neural network, as SOM is used for clustering,
Okay. SOM is also a neural network, and it is unsupervised clustering method only. It is also neural network. If you consider backpropagation algorithm, it is supervised algorithm, backpropagation neural network algorithm. But this is unsupervised algorithm.
So how it is different?
It is clustering method, like label is not provided in the data for SOM, whereas backpropagation, it is label is already present. And the learning rule is also different. Learning rules we didn't discuss. Learning rule is different for SOM, self-organizing map. So you are using winner take all rule there compared to delta learning rule in neural network classifier.
Sir,
Thank you.
Sir, any suggest the test book, particularly in clustering?
Okay, clustering, you can refer Andrew Webb.
Okay.
Andrew Webb, pattern classification, Andrew Webb.
Okay, sir.
There is a beginner can read that book. It is easier.
Andrew Webb. Okay, sir.
Okay, and all prerequisites is covered in that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You can refer my mail.
Okay, sir.
Okay. You can mail me any queries in future. You can just mail me.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Roshan sir, for explaining about various clustering techniques on data analysis. Thank you, dear participants, for bearing your time with us. Let me just take 2 minutes of your time to just summarize the 5 days of FTP which we have gone through. So first, initially, we started with our FTP on 19th, and Dr. Ashok Rao sir gave us detailed insight on data science for the 2 sessions. And then we had Dr. Arul sir, who just gave us the basics of linear algebra, vector spaces, and probability and theory, which would be very useful to do the mathematical analysis in our machine learning or artificial intelligence. It was followed by Professor Sharath, who had 4 sessions with us. So he just gave us hands-on session. He just demonstrated on various modeling or regression models and taking different methods and doing it on NumPy tool. And today we had a very beautiful session. After all these technical sessions, we had a beautiful session on how to manage our stress levels. So Mr. Raji was there with us to tell we have to live in our present moment and enjoy our beautiful lives. And now Dr. Roshan sir, he explained about all the various classification techniques on clustering on the data, whichever we are doing it. So I hope all these sessions would be a great helpful for all the participants. Thank you one and all for being with us. We'll have a validatory function now. So I would request our principal sir to speak few words regarding this FTP.
Good afternoon. We have come to the end of 5-day FDP and mathematical foundations of data science and its applications. I understand very eminent personalities across the country from different backgrounds. They have shared their expertise, starting from Dr. Ashok Rao, who is an authority in these areas, and Dr. Rajan, Dr. Sandesh Kamath from Indian Institute, Chennai Mathematical Institute, and Mr. Roshan. And from Art of Living, I understand gentlemen have shared about stress management. I hope the 5-day FDP has given some insight into what are the basic mathematics required to continue the journey in data science and its applications. I am thankful to Dr. Manjunath Reddy, Professor Bharti, Professor Bindu. All of them have taken a lot of time to make it convenient to all of you. Now I request few participants to express their views about this Atal program. We are also thankful to Atal Academy for giving a wonderful opportunity to conduct this FDP. No doubt this online classes are little difficult to organize, a little difficult to understand, and all those issues are there. But in spite of that, ACIT has taken initiative to give knowledge in these upcoming areas, and we have tried our level best. So I request you to participate, give your feedback, and also all the experts are ready to share their expertise in the days to come. You can interact with them through mail and other means, so that those who are interested to pursue research in data science and its applications will be continue to get the benefit of these eminent people. So I request one or two to give the feedback, so that we will convey the same to Atal, and we request Atal to give us some more opportunities in the days to come, both online and offline, for the benefit of teaching community. Thank you, Nanda.
I enjoyed the session by Dr. Arul sir from NIT Surathkal. Way he carried out complete mathematical concept from beginning to the end. It was extraordinary. And definitely, Dr. Kesar Rao said, he just all the PPTs what he shown like he was linking with the real-time, application of data science. That was extraordinary. And of course, this stress management, like art of living, morning session was again it was very very good. And I hope we are definitely we are going to use these all things in coming days. And end with the Dr. Roshan sir session was also, of course, it was extraordinary, right? A way, all this mathematical model to be discussed, right? All concepts related to this machine learning, clustering part and all, right? So overall, it was a very, very good experience. Thank you very much. Thanks to all organizers.
Thank you, Kamlesh sir. Gayatri ma'am, would you like to share your views on this FTP?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah.
Hello, faculty members. The end of this FDP is a beginning for all of us, right? And it was a great learning experience. And this FDP has aided in improving the technical dimension, right? So I'm thankful to Global Academy of Technology for conducting this FDP, and the objective of this FDP is met. The objective of any FDP is basically great learning, and it has been met. The introductory sessions by Dr. Ashok Rao on data science, the concepts he covered, the real-time examples he has given, the various applications he has given, the topics related to subspaces and data compression sessions, though theoretical, were really great. It was a huge learning experience. The non-theoretical sessions by Professor Sharad on supervised learning and deep learning were highly technical, and it will basically help us swat up the ML concepts. The mathematical sessions by on linear algebra and probability and statistics by Dr. Arunal Rajan were really valuable and have given us a great, massive learning experience. The clustering techniques, of course, by Dr. Roshan Joy was a great learning session, and the various topics he covered related to k-means clustering, Gaussian mixture models were really great. Of course, the stress management session by Mr. Varun Upadhyay was a real learning experience. So I request the coordinators of this FDP program, Dr. Manjunath and his team, to keep organizing such FDPs. And such FDPs basically nourish our mind and fill with more knowledge, and it has made us technically more efficient and competent. So such FDPs are a real great learning, and the objective has met. I give a great round of applause to Dr. Manjunath sir and his team. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri ma'am. We are very happy to know that. We are very glad, and we would definitely organize few more FDPs. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Any other participants who are interested to share your views, you can. Are there any other participants who would like to share? Then, okay, we shall just have vote of thanks now. Dr. Ravi J will render the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, one and all present here. I, Dr. Ravi J, Professor, Department of ECE, Global Academy of Technology. On behalf of Global Academy of Technology, I take this opportunity to present vote of thanks for all those who have contributed for the faculty development program on mathematical modulation, mathematical foundations of data sciences and applications. At the outset, I thank the director of Atal Academics, Dr. Ravindra Singh Soni, and Assistant Director of Atal Academics, Dr. Giridhar Lal, and the Atal coordinators, Mr. Gaurav and Mr. Rahul, for providing us an opportunity to conduct 5 days FDP at our institution, Global Academy of Technology, Bangalore. I thank the resource persons, Dr. Ashok Rao, Dr. Arulalan Ranjan, and Professor Sharath, Dr. Roshan, and Ranbir Nambiar for sharing their knowledge with us. We are really enlightened with our abundant knowledge. I wholeheartedly thank you all. I would like to thank our management and our principal, Dr. Rana Pratap Reddy sir, for their enthusiastic support. A special thank to our head of the department, Dr. Manjunath Reddy, HS, and organizing committee members, Dr. Manjunath RC, Bindu, and Bharati, along with our teaching and non-teaching staff for their constant support and coordination for smooth conduction of 5 days FDP program. Finally, I thank all the participants for showing keen interest in learning. Thank you so much for paying your valuable attention and making this program a great success. So with these words, we move to the end of 5 days FTP. I thank you all once again. Have a weekend. Thank you very much.
Dear participants, we'll be posting feedback now in the WhatsApp group. Please fill that and submit it. And later, within 10 minutes, we'll be posting the assignment questions. So for that, we'll be having enough time. So evening till 9 p.m. you'll be having time. So try to fill the assignment questions, answers, and submit it on or before 9 p.m. today itself. Do you have any questions to be asked related to the assignment? I mean, related to any doubts with respect to the timings? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So one more thing I just wanted to remind. Once you submit the assignment, please fill the feedback which is available in the Atal port. So without filling that, you will not be getting any certificate. So you need to fill the feedback which is available even in the Atal port, and certificate will be available to you within 6 to 7 working days.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.